this is, a part of a larger pattern of more aggressive behavior, but not uncommon behavior by these Russian pilots. Except this time is the first time that it resulted in this level of an incident.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, Russia and the United States have been on a collision course for some time now, but now that's literally true. We had a bit of a crash, and now there's a lot of concern over Russia's control over the Black Sea. Tell us a little bit about what has gone on, get us caught up.
Earlier this week, there was a U.S. drone that was doing, normal reconnaissance, normal surveillance over the Black Sea, and it's not uncommon for Russian pilots in jets to sort of go at them, to harass them a little bit, to intercept them is the term the military uses.
Right.
Except this week, things went even further when one of these Russian fighter pilots actually collided with the U.S. drone. And so, as soon as this happened, the U.S. military realized they had to take it down. So they took it down over the Black Sea. It has since now sunk, and the U.S. is now evaluating whether or not they'll be able to recover it at all. But we've heard from military leaders that they took steps once this happened to wipe everything and make sure that should Russia or any other country be able to recover it, they wouldn't be able to gather any U.S. intelligence from it. Now this, as I said, is not necessarily uncommon for Russian pilots to do, and we've heard that from military leaders in the time since this happened,
right.
Saying that this is, a part of a larger pattern of more aggressive behavior, but not uncommon behavior by these Russian pilots. Except this time is the first time that it resulted in this level of an incident. And even to this point, U.S. officials aren't even sure if the pilot was intending to do this.
Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of concerns we've heard from lawmakers who want the Biden administration to have a little bit more of a policy about how it handles the Black Sea, and just a general heightened level of concern about Russian bellicosity.
Absolutely. We heard from lawmakers who are involved in foreign affairs and foreign relations expressing concern about what this could represent if this is a start of something new.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a bill that's currently in the Senate that was reintroduced this week to force the Biden administration to come up with or develop a more concrete plan towards how to handle the Black Sea so events like these don't happen again.
Right. And so, there has also been some Republican senators who've been speaking out on the importance of aiding Ukraine, given that the top two presidential candidates on their party side, former President Donald Trump, and potentially, should he get in, but most people assume he will, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Trump and DeSantis have been a bit more skeptical of aiding Ukraine, and you've started to see some of these GOP senators push back.
That's a good point. So this week was the first time we've really seen somewhat of a divide come forward in terms of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as you mentioned, both former President Trump and Governor DeSantis said publicly that they don't view helping Ukraine as in vital U.S. interest.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, DeSantis called it a territorial dispute, which got a lot of pushback from some Republican senators, including
right.
Marco Rubio.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really did show a slight divide amongst them, and also, for example, Nikki Haley, who's also announced the presidential campaign,
right.
who came out and said, as well as Vice President Mike Pence,
mm-hmm.
who's not yet declared a presidential campaign,
mm-hmm.
said that it is important for the U.S. to continue to aid Ukraine because, in their estimation, if Ukraine doesn't stop Russia, Russia will go eventually to a NATO country.
So what's the current state of play in Ukraine right now? Obviously this offensive in Bakhmut, the fighting over that city has continued. Where do things stand right now?
So the fighting in Bakhmut has gone on for 6 to 7 months now. It's really been, a very incremental slogfest over somewhat of a tiny town that's fairly insignificant in the grand scheme of the war, and yet Russia has refused, to pull their troops back and advance elsewhere,
right.
and Ukraine has refused to give it up. So it really has become somewhat of a stalemate. Despite the stalemate, Russia is making incremental gains, over the course of weeks at a time, yet both sides are losing staggering amounts of soldiers. And so the fighting here is still going on. Ukrainian President Zelensky is continuing to say that they will stand by and they will not retreat from Bakhmut. And in his explanation of why, if Russia gets Bakhmut, they have easier access to future cities or future towns. And so to him, it's not just about defending the city of Bakhmut, which is a small town, but it's about preventing Russia the ability to get access to further cities or towns.
So this, on the Russian side, has even revealed some tensions between the mercenaries who play such a big role in the fight in Bakhmut and the Russian Defense Ministry.
That's correct. We've heard essentially Russia looking for a scapegoat, and there are different parties involved. But with the Battle of Bakhmut continuing, for 6 months, losing thousands upon thousands of soldiers, it really has become somewhat of a blame game. And so we've seen the Wagner founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, blame the Russian Ministry of Defense, say that they're not, providing his troops with ample supplies. However, we've also seen him receive some, as a result, some distance from President Putin after, President Putin gave him this opportunity for his troops to, lead the Battle of Bakhmut, to capture it, and he's failed that. And so we've seen President Putin, as well as the Russian Ministry of Defense, sort of set him up almost as a scapegoat for what's happening there.
So closer to home, President Biden has released his budget, and that includes his budget for the Department of Defense and broader national security spending. But there was a defense official who had an interesting observation about the general trajectory of defense spending. And what was that?
So in President Biden's budget, for the Pentagon specifically, it was about $840 billion. And that number in itself is about $100 billion more than the enacted budget from 2 years ago. So noting the continuing trend of the defense spending and the defense budget going up, the Pentagon comptroller said earlier this week that it's inevitable that the defense budget will surpass $1 trillion in the next coming years. That stands obviously in stark contrast to the Republicans we've heard on Capitol Hill, who have called for cuts as it is.
$1 trillion here and $1 trillion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.